Well, praise the Lord and good evening, and welcome to a special edition of the Mount Sinai Bible Study. The Mount Sinai Apostle Church is conveniently located on the corner of Peters and West Church Streets here in the beautiful city of Martinsville, Virginia. I am Pastor Richardson, and I'm so grateful and so honored to have as our special guest on this evening a dear friend of many, many years, a friend, a colleague, a brother, Bishop Don Williams. We're going to get into that with a little bit more in just a minute. I do want to announce that if there are some individuals who are not on social media and want to hear but maybe not be able to see the special presentation for this evening, you can dial the number 605-475-3235. Again, that's 605-475-3235, and the access code is 849706#. Again, that access code is 849706#. You won't be able to see it, but certainly you can hear it. This Sunday at Mount Sinai, I believe, Mount Sinai, I didn't bring the right announcement sheet out, but I believe this coming Sunday at 11 a.m., it will be our HEPS Ministries anniversary as a part of our 11 a.m. worship. HEPS Ministries are those who participate in hospitality, ushers, and pulpit assistants. So this will be their anniversary, and we want to celebrate with them. And we want you to come, especially if you do not have a church home. You're certainly welcome to come to Mount Sinai. Bishop Williams is going to give us a short prayer, and then we're going to share with you why this evening, we think this evening is so special. Bless you, bro.
This is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. It is in the name of Jesus that we come thanking you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to share what thus saith the Lord to your people. We are living in extreme times, and so we need an extreme gospel. We ask, Lord, that you would bless us. We ask that you would have this conversation be fruitful, that people would understand that we are in serious times, but there's nothing too hard for God. We ask that you would bless our conversation and that people would see the sincerity and the love of why we are doing this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I didn't mention this to you. Thank you, Bishop, for the prayer. I didn't mention this to you, but one of the ways that you have helped to raise my social awareness is especially during the time that you were with Bread for the World. So can you just share with us a little bit in terms of what that was and what that still is, and what are the kinds of ministries in which you're involved that may be outside of the church but yet a part of the church?
Well, Bread for the World is a citizens organization that does public policy work around the issues of hunger and poverty domestically and internationally. We worked on things like the child care program, Head Start. We worked on food stamps over the years, trying to get the federal budget to a point whereby people won't go hungry. It's just that basic. It's a basic human issue. Nobody in this country should go hungry. It's a sin, really, for anybody to go hungry in this country. And so we would use our public policy would be to go to our congressmen and senators, President of the United States, in order to lobby, which is used in a sometimes a negative connotation, but we did it not for ourselves, but we did it for the poor and the hungry people, which is a part of what Jesus wanted us to do in his declaration in Luke 4. So I would my position was I was the associate director of African American Church Relations, and I would interface with the denominations, mainly denominations of the African American Church, but also African Americans within white denominations or European denominations, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Methodists, whatever, and United Methodists, that is. But and so I did that for 26 years, and retired in 2014. Since then, I've been more involved in my church denomination, the United Church of Jesus Christ, as the bishop over our young adult department. That's the group from 18 through 35, the millennials they call them. And then I am also the bishop over our interorganizational relations and public policy department, and that afforded me the opportunity to use some of the skills and the expertise that I had at Bread for the World to do that for our church. Just recently, I've been asked to become the president of the African American family of an organization called Christian Churches Together in the United States. And so I'm in the process now of getting my church to become a part of that, so I can become the president of it when the time is right. So that's basically what I've been doing.
In terms of this, tell me again the name of the group that has asked you to become president.
It's called Christian Churches Together. It's made up of the 5 faith families in the United States, which would be the mainline churches like Presbyterian, Lutheran, Episcopalian, those churches, the evangelical Pentecostal, which is mainly the white evangelicals and Pentecostals.
Okay.
Then you would have the Orthodox Church, which would be some of the, like the Syrian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, various Orthodox churches. Then you would have the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And they work through the U.S. Congress of Catholic Bishops mainly. And then you have the African American churches, which would be mainly the historic black churches, but other organizations that are black that could be a part of some of the others. They would fall in that category if they chose to be a part of it.
So when you say the predominantly black churches, we're talking Baptists, Methodists, Pentecostals, Trinitarian, and Oneness Pentecostals.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it has not been oneness. Our church is the first oneness organization that has applied. So it's been mainly Trinitarian, but they see the importance of opening up things. And so I think this will be a good test of to where they are in terms of dealing with that.
Well, you and I will stay in contact. So I pray that the Lord will open that door, that you will become president. One of the things I've always appreciated about your ministry is the ecumenical nature of your ministry. And sometimes I think we become so focused that we truly believe that the Lord does not ever use anybody else outside of our group when the word says, I have sheep that are not of this fold. And that does not mean that I ever have to step away from what I believe because I'm not going to do that. But I also understand that the Lord is bigger than me and bigger than my group.
Right.
And and they're when you become international, that's one of the ways that you begin to see that. Well, one of the reasons I wanted you to come on with me, as we know, since the election has shifted, President Biden stepping aside, and Vice President Kamala Harris becoming the prohibitive favorite as the Democratic nominee, and I can't think of her vice president candidate's name.
Tim Waltz.
Waltz, okay. that it has really just blown up.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you prior to us going live that I don't know if anyone fully expected that to happen. It has become a movement, as many people are saying. And there's so many different groups who have publicly come out in support of Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor, give his name again?
Wow.
Governor Walz. And I've been genuinely impressed with both of them in terms of how they are presenting themselves. And as you know, I was saying earlier, one of the issues that I feel like the church, the Universal Christian Church, needs to be aware of is this Project 2025.
Yes.
And what that means. It is a document that has set up a playbook or an agenda for a conservative president. And let me add this before you begin to share. One of the things that we as any minority group in America needs to recognize that for the most part, it has been conservative groups that have been active in trying to stomp or to hold back progress of minorities. There was a time when in the South, in particular, they were Democrats, but now they're primarily Republicans. So I don't get hung up on parties as much as I look at philosophy and ideology, because what I have seen in my lifetime is that both groups at one time or another held that conservative bent. So what I have seen is whether there was a time where the Democrats were were the conservatives who fought against civil rights. In fact, this is not a verbatim statement, but when President Johnson signed the civil rights law, I think in 1964, and the voting rights in 65, he said that the South would be lost to the Democratic Party for at least a generation. Right. And not long after that, all of the Democrats in the South gradually began to shift to Republicans, because my understanding was President Nixon, who initially got elected in 1968, right, made a pitch to Southerners and said, if you will come on board with us, then we will be very deliberate in slowing down civil rights. And then it went to a higher level in 1980 with President Reagan. It was called, I think part of it was called the Southern Strategy. And so then that's when we began to see a shift in the South. Now I remember Governor Mills Godwin from Virginia. The first time he ran for governor, he ran as a Democrat. And he ran, of course, in Virginia, you can't do a consecutive term, so he had to sit out 4 years. And then when he was elected the second time, it was as a Republican. And that was because of that conservative shift right in the South from Democrats to Republicans. So what is your thinking, what is your proactive or reactive thinking when it comes to conservatives and minorities trying to move forward just like any other group in America?
I don't know what they're trying to conserve.
Okay.
First of all. Second of all, I think that you see a real shift and a real urgency in what they're trying to do, because they understand that within the next 10, 15, 20 years, that this will be a minority, what they call a majority country, mm-hmm, where most of the people in the United States will be what they call minorities. Mm-hmm. That's another term that I don't like to use.
Okay.
I don't call myself a minority.
Okay.
Because when you put that label on you, you're saying you're less than.
Okay.
And we are part of the global majority.
Okay.
Most people in the world look like us, or some few of us.
Okay.
There are only a few people that are considered Caucasian or,
okay,
or whatever. So that's a term that I just don't use for myself.
All right.
But I use it in understanding what they're trying to do.
Okay.
the conservative group, again, when you talk about it, it means to hold on to what I've got. I don't want to give you what I've got. I'm holding on. I'm conserving what I have, and what I have, I want to keep because I feel it's mine.
Okay.
It's something that has belonged to me. This is my birthright. I was born here, and not realizing that you came here as an immigrant like everybody else.
Yeah.
Only people that were here were those that were native born, and they were kind enough to let you in. And then when you got in, you took the land.
Yeah.
And not only that, did you take the land, you brought other folks in here.
And to add to that, so immigrants are not just those who come from black and brown countries. Immigrants are all of those who come from European countries, wherever, because as you're saying, it was only the American Indians who are the indigenous or who are the original people. And so when people say you need to go back to where you're from, who was it? I can't remember what comedian said, well, that means for all of us to go back.
Go back, yeah.
You know, and I'm going to get personal here. Former President Trump has come out strongly against immigrants, especially from black and brown countries, because as you know, he used a very disrespectful term talking about certain countries. But I think it's interesting that two of his wives have been immigrants.
Right.
And then secondly, when the Republicans and Democrats in the Congress had supposedly come to an agreement to present an immigrant bill to President Biden to sign it, then Trump told the leadership, don't support it because he wanted to run on that. So he was not interested in trying to see a bipartisan agreement between Republicans and Democrats. He wanted to run on something that he thought would arouse the anger of people so that he can get reelected. So if you are opposed to immigrants, how come you keep marrying them?
Right.
You know, but that's just one of the things.
Another thing about that too is that when you know something about how this country came to be a country, Texas, California, Arizona, Nevada, all of that was part of Mexico.
Okay.
So these people, they ain't doing them coming back home in the first place. You know, so it's one of those things that we put up these artificial borders. I think one of the things, and I don't mean to sound kind of out there, but one of the things when I first saw a picture of Earth from the perspective of what the astronauts saw, I noticed that there were no lines drawn anywhere.
Okay.
No lines showing where Florida was, no lines showing where China was, no lines showing where Russia was. And we were on this little ball by ourselves with no lines.
Okay.
We were the ones who started dividing stuff up and making, states. You got a line here, and I've watched it. Even in your GPS, you could be riding in Virginia, and you ride into North Carolina, and the GPS will even show that the speed limit is changed.
Yeah.
You know, so I think if we were to understand that we were all on this little planet by ourselves, ain't nobody foreign, because everybody has the same accoutrements.
Okay.
They have noses and ears and a mouth and hands and feet. Everybody looks alike.
Okay.
And so how can you be foreign if, now if somebody came here from Mars, they would be foreign.
Okay.
But here, I don't even like using that term. I know people do, but you're my brother, you're my sister. And for you to be so arrogant to think that the world revolves around just you
Okay.
and your kind.
Okay.
That's what this 2025 project is about, trying to hold on and all. But the Bible says in Psalm that the liberal soul shall be made fat.
Okay.
So if I'm going to be a liberal or conservative, I think I'd rather be the liberal soul.
Well, since you brought up Project 2025, let me just share some of the items that are in this document. And I want to say at the outset, you do not have to accept the word of Bishop Williams or mine. You can go on the internet and pull this up for yourself, because that's where we got it from. One of the things that they are proposing is to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education, and as a part of eliminating that, they are proposing to use public funds to pay for private religious schools. Now, I don't know if this is private and religious schools or private/religious schools, because here in Martinsville we have a school called Carlisle, which is a private school but is not a religious school.
Right.
But if you go down to Danville, I can't think of the name of the church, but they have a private/religious school. So what they are saying here is that they want to do away with public education and just focus on private education. And having served on a school board once, we know that public education has been historic and has been very meaningful in those who did not have a lot of resources to get an excellent education. Again, when you talk about, and they have also encouraged Christian indoctrination through public schools. Now, if you're saying Christian indoctrination, then we need to first of all find out whoever is proposing this, how do you define Christian?
Right.
And secondly, what do you mean by indoctrination? Because if you can feel like you can resent or even hate someone who does not look exactly like you in terms of pigmentation, but as you said, what was that word? Accoutrements? Was that the word you used? Accoutrements. As in terms of always having two eyes, two ears, two opens in our nose and one mouth. If you can do that and still feel like you are a Christian, then I need to know how you are defining what it means to be a Christian. And again, allow me a personal privilege. When I served on the school board for one term, and maybe at a private conversation I'll get into that, people wanted me to come out and talk against prayer being taken out of schools. Well, my contention is you can pray anywhere. Right. If your fuss is over a 60-second ritual, but then your actions do not indicate that you're being Christian toward everybody, then what is it that you're really fussing about? What is it that you're really proposing? I have told students here, and I mentioned it in my sermon Sunday, when I've been asked to come to the court to testify on behalf of somebody, I'm sitting there in the court praying before I go to the witness stand, ask the Lord to tell me what to say and how to say it. Nobody, there is no officer in the court coming over to me and said, Pastor Richardson, you can't pray in here. Right. Because I'm not praying out loud. And so same thing in schools. You don't have to stop praying. And so sometimes we get sidetracked on something that really has nothing to do with anything. You can pray anytime, anywhere. When Hannah was praying because she wanted a son, and eventually God gave her Samuel, Eli, the priest, thought she was drunk because her mouth was moving, but she was not uttering anything. And he thought, that she had had too much wine. My point was, she was in the temple praying, and the priest did not even recognize that she was praying. It says to me, I can go anywhere in this nation, and I can sit down and pray. And so when we start talking about what has been taken out of schools, the other side of it, I went through schools, they were totally segregated. We prayed every day. Mm-hmm. But the predominantly African-American schools did not get the best equipment because the prayer never got to the office of the superintendent. Right. But we prayed every day. So when you have experienced things firsthand, then you don't just arbitrarily jump on everything. So when they're talking about eliminating the Department of Education, then you're focusing on having a different standard for those who need more than those who are being blessed. You know, we were talking earlier that you would pull up a budget of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And when you look at what is proposed for the Defense Department as opposed to what's proposed for some of these social programs, it's absolutely amazing. I think you said the Defense Department has 51% of the budget, and the things that conservatives holler about, like welfare, is what, baby?
It's 57% for the military.
Okay.
Industrial complex.
Now let me say this: if we have the capacity now that we have enough artillery to bomb the whole world, why do we need to bomb them 3 and 4 times? It's kind of like I've seen in the paper where somebody was given 3 life terms of prison. Well, when he finished that first life, where do those 2 other lives gonna come from? You know, so if we have the capacity already to destroy the whole world, then what is it that we need to keep? Why is it that we need to keep making more artillery? I have nothing against the military being equipped and prepared, but if you know, but what goes into that industrial military complex? Well, go ahead.
Well, for food, all of the stuff that's food and agriculture, that's 1% of the federal budget.
Okay.
And somewhere within this particular piece is just a little shiny sliver where food stamp programs and other things come in, but the Republicans blame that on the deficit, saying that putting money into that will balloon the deficit. You got 57% for the military, 1% for agriculture, food stamps, and that type of thing. In terms of your international affairs, we only give 3% of our federal budget to that. So most of it is going towards this psychosis that we have, that they come in to get us. And that's where we're putting most of our money.
Okay.
In this thing.
And see, like I said, because you know, I've had some dear friends to serve in the military. Some paid the supreme price, so I have absolutely no problem with the military being adequately equipped.
Right.
I have no problem with that. But then, as I said earlier, if you have the capacity to destroy the whole world now with the artillery that you have, why is it that we need to keep raising that budget every year, and yet we're going to blame those who have the least and get the least, and yet say that they are the cause of the budget, and yet we say absolutely nothing about the major tax break that Mr. Trump gave to the richest of the people, and this Project 2025 is saying that they're going to do that again. All right.
That's kind of like being in a pool full of gasoline with a cigarette lighter. It's only one cigarette lighter. That's all you really need.
That's all you really need.
That's going to take you out. You know. So.
Well, when you look at this Project 2025, they're giving tax cuts, proposing tax cuts for major corporations, while increasing the taxes on the rest of the population. They're talking about banning African American and gender studies in all levels of education. Why should there be a ban on African American studies? When I went through school, kindergarten through 12th grade, was never taught anything. You know, you'd hear something about Booker T. Washington. Dr. King had not come along at the time. Well, he came along while I was in high school. But we may hear something about Booker T. Washington, or 1 or 2. But now they're proposing to ban. What is the purpose of that? Are you also proposing to ban studies on other groups that are not part of the majority? I mean, so what is it? If we are a democratic society, and let me just interject this. When you have people who profess to be Christians, and yet they are willing to do things that are detrimental to other so-called Christian brothers and sisters. Again, then how are you defining what it means to be a Christian? And so one of the things I feel that is incumbent upon the church is that, first of all, every Christian ought to be a registered voter. And when I hear people say my vote does not count, the only reason your vote does not count is that you don't vote. And because if you vote, then your vote will count. I think again, I'm dating myself, but I think in 1960 when the late President Kennedy ran against the former Vice President Nixon, it was said that if at least 5, I think, voters in every precinct in the nation had voted for Nixon rather than Kennedy, Nixon would have won. And so there have been elections that were decided by less than 100 votes, less than 50 votes. And so that's when we know that every vote does count. They're talking about eliminating unions and all worker protections. A lot of working class people began to get a livable wage when unions came into being. Now, I don't think there's anybody, even if you are opposed to unions, I don't think you are opposed to people who put in an honest day's work, making an honest day paid. Now, one document we've been looking at says that there are 120 million poor people in the United States, the richest country in the world, and we have 120 million. And I don't remember where I heard this, Bishop, but they said that one of the reasons that many in this poor class don't vote is they don't feel that anybody is talking about their concerns. They talked about the past presidential debates that in many instances the poor class never comes up. They talk about middle class, they talk about upper class, but they don't talk about. And so that indictment has come out against Democrats and Republicans. And so somebody out there who's running for president has got to say there are 120 million people in this rich, wealthy nation that has poor people. Now, you can't say all these people are lazy. You can't say that because that would be an inaccurate statement.
Most of them have 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah.
Still can't make it.
Yeah.
I remember when I was at Bread, there was a group called the Circle of Protection. There was a number of religious leaders of different types. And I remember being asked to reach out to some of the African American denominational heads to go to a meeting with President Obama at the White House, and to really get them to talk about the poor, because it was not something that they were talking about. And if you notice now, they're really not talking about it. It's mainly we got to raise the middle class, raise the middle class. Well, if the middle class is going to be raised, it's got to come from somewhere, and that's the poor folks. You try to get them up to a level and work it, but that's always been a problem, trying to get those in government to really address that head on. They will come at it from the side, or they will try to do some things that will hit it, in a way that they won't say the word poor, but for some reason seems like they don't want to use that term.
Well, continuing with Project 2025, there's a proposal to raise the retirement age, and secondly, to eliminate Social Security. And so what we see here is that, if I'm understanding their proposals correctly, is that seems to be an intentional effort to lay burdens on the least of these and bless those who have the most. And at some point, the question has to be raised: if I vote for you, what is it about your platform that addresses my issues?
Right.
And so I'm really excited to hear more about what Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Fultz, what they are proposing, because it's not enough to be against somebody. There ought to be something that you are for, that lets the people know this is why you need to consider voting for me. So when you're talking about raising retirement age, and eliminating Social Security, well, two questions I have. One is, what age are you proposing to raise it to? And secondly, why, if you're proposing to eliminate Social Security, what are you proposing to put in place of that? And if you're not proposing to put anything in place of it, then why?
Because they want you dead.
Okay.
Only the strong survive. Jerry Butler used to sing that some years ago. So the idea of it is to eliminate those people who cannot fend for themselves. And once they're gone, then what they had then is mine. So it's a death sentence is really what it is.
Okay. I'm just wondering who are they proposing to take on some of the positions of employment that poor now are placed in the positions to do. But again,
the other thing on that though is that they are. You have to look at what's happening in terms of technology.
Okay.
Because technology is taking a lot of jobs.
Okay.
You've got this whole idea of artificial intelligence that's coming along. That's going to, they say, revolutionize a lot of things. So they're working it to the point where they're getting rid of the people that they just don't feel they need anymore.
Okay. Okay. Well, and another proposal that they have is condemn single mothers while encouraging traditional families. I don't know why it has to be either or when it's already both. There are single mothers and there are single fathers. Of course, I agree that and if all things being equal, having a father and a mother in the family is preferable. But sometimes it occurs not because a mother got pregnant out of wedlock, but because somebody died,
Right.
or a divorce.
Right.
And so there are instances here when you have to look at if you're going to condemn single mothers, then how is that encouraging them to keep trying to make things better? And then they got dismantling the FBI and the Homeland Security Department. One of the things that they said here is that the U.S. military can be used to break up protests, and so America.
You won't believe what just came on my phone.
What?
When Trump was out in front of the church.
Yeah, close to the White House.
Close to the White House. That was the same day that he was trying to get the military to get rid of the protesters.
Okay.
That was the exact same day.
Okay.
And he just showed up on my phone with his Bible upside down.
And so people need to understand that protesting in America has been one of the ways that we have gotten things changed. And that's one of the reasons the late Dr. Martin Luther King, along with so many others in the civil rights movement, emphasized nonviolence. Right. And they knew in many instances that they were going to be confronted with violence, and yet many of them still gave their lives. Yeah. And so now we're saying that if people do nonviolent protests, that the president can call on the U.S. military to contain and stop other American citizens from protesting. All of that is a part of democracy. And then another part that I read is that you have career individuals in the government, some in the Department of Education, some in the Department of Interior, some in the Department of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. There is a proposal from Project 2025 to fire or retire those individuals and then replace them with individuals who are committed to be loyal to the next conservative president. Now, these individuals don't publicly proclaim whether they are Democrat or Republican. They just work in the government to keep it operating no matter who the president is. But they are proposing that these individuals be fired. I guess they'll have to sign some kind of a loyalty oath if they're not. But all of this smacks of getting away from a democratic society.
And it smacks of racism.
Okay.
Because I was born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And most of the government workers in Washington, as I grew up, were people that looked like me.
Okay.
You had I call them the ant, the little, worker bees.
Mm-hmm.
Those people lived in the community. They went to work every day. My mother worked for the federal government for a while, and she worked for the district government.
Okay.
And most all her co-workers were people that looked like her.
Okay.
And so when you do that, you are getting rid of a lot of black folks in those jobs.
And the other thing that you get rid of is a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And if the primary qualification for the job is to sign a loyalty oath to the next conservative president, then what does that say about competence? What does that say about being prepared and adequately trained? And so, again, it looks like we are trying to move away from, not looks like, these proposals are designed to move us away from the democratic government that we have now. As we know, we especially on the federal level, but not just that. There are three co-equal branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. But when the Supreme Court came out with the ruling that the president is pretty much immune, then it looked like that was the beginning of a merger of the judicial with the executive. And so if we are considering these kinds of major moves, then we're saying that the founding fathers had absolutely no sense at all. They didn't know what they were doing, that this is a much better way, which is certainly not true. Now, of course, I could never agree with everything that the founding fathers had, because they certainly were not opposed to slavery. And so there are some things that we always look at through a different lens. But when you start saying that all of the federal workers must be loyal to the current president, it looks like a slippery slope that we're going down.
Demagoguery
Okay.
instead of democracy.
Okay. And so that's one of the reasons I think it's so important for Christians to vote. Now, when people tell me that they cannot vote for Vice President Harris, and I ask them why, and they talk about abortion, and they talk about gay rights, and I said, well, my problem with abortion is those who seem to be against it don't seem to be in favor of life from the womb to the tomb. Right. They want a fetus to be born, and after that, I don't hear that kind of excitement, that kind of interest as to how we need to be as committed to the life of that child once he or she comes into the world.
No Head Start.
Yeah, well, they're proposing to end Head Start. That's something else. And anything that seems to be designed to help minorities, they want to do away with it. They want to do away with it.
But the thing of it is, most of the people that are that take advantage of those programs are white young women. They are not minorities as such. Most of the people are white young women.
What was the program that I'm trying to think of it? That was supposed to designed to give minorities a chance to get even. I can't think of the name of the program. It was usually used at many colleges. Oh, affirmative action.
Affirmative action, yeah.
according to Roland Martin, who's usually right on when it comes to facts, white women have benefited more from affirmative action than any minority group. And so and the other thing about affirmative action, it does not give a person who is not qualified
Right.
to get in a position. What it does is give qualified people a chance who have been left out simply because of the color of their skin. But they still have to meet the same criteria and qualifications as everybody else. And that's something that people seem to look over. And that's not accurate. That's not accurate. But yes, according to Roland Martin, it is white women who have benefited much more from affirmative action than any other minority group. So it says then, if we're going to create this, then we're going to not only look at the blacks and the browns, but then we're going to throw in women of all shades. And according to Roland Martin, that is the group that has by far benefited greater from affirmative action. And so when we begin to get serious about voting, then I think one of the things also accompanies that is a desire to know more about what the issues are. And don't just vote on something to vote against somebody. Also know why you're voting against them and know why you're voting for somebody. So I really hope that part of what comes from this conversation we're having tonight is that individuals will give more time and attention to looking at the platforms. In other words, what is Mr. Reagan running on, and what is Ms. Harris running on? You know, what is it that they are proposing that will make America a better nation? And know what those things are, and know why you are for them, and know why you are against them. But I will say this. It seems to me that the candidacy of Vice President Harris and Governor,
Wall.
I gotta lock his name in,
Yep.
has become a movement.
Yeah.
And individuals were not, even though some, I think, felt that at some point President Biden would step down, whether before the election or after, it does not look like that the pundits, those who are supposed to have that political vision, they don't seem to have seen this coming like it has come. And it has become a massive, inclusive movement. And when I said inclusive, it made me think about another thing that Project 2025 wants to dismantle. It's called DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And again, we're looking at a way for those who have been qualified but have been left out for a specific reason. And so this is not bringing in people who are not qualified. This is to include people who have been left out because they are qualified, but for some other reason, skin color or some other reason.
It gets a bad connotation, but I heard a new definition of what DEI means.
What is that?
Donald, Jr., Eric, and Ivanka.
Okay, I had not heard that one. DEI, Donald, Eric, and Ivanka. Okay, okay, I had not heard that. That's interesting. That's
A
interesting.
little comic relief right now.
That's yeah. But voting has been an historic, important way for minorities to advance. Now, when people say my vote don't count, my vote doesn't count. Excuse me. How many states passed laws after the 2020 election that was designed to make voting more difficult?
I couldn't give you the exact number, but it's over half.
And so my point is, if voting does not count, why are these states working so vigorously to slow down, if not eliminate, the possibility of you being able to vote. That says loud and clear, your vote makes a difference. Your vote counts. And so if you are thinking it does not count, so you're not going to vote, then there are some people who are excited because they don't want you to vote because they don't think you're going to vote for their candidates. Well, if your candidate is not saying anything that's positive about my agenda, then why should I vote for your candidate? You know, why should I do that? And so when people say, well, the African Americans have always voted one way, well, you got other groups have always voted one way. Right. So why is it that we have to be singled out? There are other groups who have actually voted against their best interest, right. But nobody seems to say anything about that. So, and I said when I was sharing with our congregation on the congregational call, one of the reasons I believe voting is important because when Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees, he said, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, unto God that which is God." Caesar is the government. And so there is a responsibility that followers of Jesus has in terms of confronting the government. There is somebody in the church who has to speak truth to power. And so if we feel like that's not something that I'm supposed to be involved in, well, what about the Lord giving his life for us? What about all of these civil rights workers who gave their lives? And I remember in my first pastorate, it was in Washington, D.C., your home city. This older minister came to the little small church where I was pastoring and said, what Dr. King and the civil rights workers done was unnecessary and it has not made a difference. And I stood up with my afro and my arrogance and say, Elder, you talking a bunch of crap. And the church got quiet. The church agreed with what I was saying. They just disagreed with how I said it. And I told them, I said, you are a salesman downtown in a furniture store that you probably wouldn't even be doing if it hadn't been from some of the successes of the civil rights movement. You may have been working there, but your options would have been more limited than they are. So for people who have benefited from the civil rights movement and then want to criticize, well, you know, if this is not that important, then why are you accepting the benefits? A young friend of mine some years ago had some difficulty with his employer. The first thing I asked was, are you in the union? He said, no. I said, why? And he couldn't give me a reason. So when he went to the union for help, they didn't help him. I said, the union is there to assist you. And it is also there to make sure that you are treated fairly. And so paying your dues, if that gives you another option, then what's wrong with that? Now, does that mean that every company needs to be unionized? I don't know. There are some that have done very well without unions, right. And there are some who work people to death for minimum wages without unions. And then once unions came in some instances they said that they had to close down, but that was a way to discourage companies, employees from unionizing. But you have workers who are so dedicated, I'm talking about blue-collar workers, they are so dedicated that they will get to that place of employment anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes before it's time for them to go on. Right. And it's because they are committed to that place of employment. And so you have excellent employees. And so why don't you pay them? I never will forget a friend of mine owned a business uptown and unfortunately had to go to prison. And he told me, he said, bruh, I found out if you pay your employees, they're fair with you. And the whole time he was in prison, his business ran like clockwork because he paid his employees. He said if people get upset with you, if they find the opportunity to steal, they're going to do it. But if you pay them a livable wage, not only will they not steal from you, they'll treat your business like it's theirs. Right. And so what do you have to lose by paying people a livable wage? The money goes back into the economy, everybody benefits. So there seems to be an attitude of greediness. I don't know if it's such term as greediness, but gluttony for money. And I don't begrudge anybody from making money. I don't begrudge anybody from becoming a millionaire. But I think there are very few who have done it by themselves. There have been some foot soldiers who have helped you in the trenches. So why shouldn't they be rewarded for a livable wage? So I'm encouraging, and we are encouraging those who are in the church and those who may not even be in the church, that this is a major responsibility that's coming up this year. This is a major election. With this Project 25, there are people, and I'm told that the entire document is over 900 pages.
Right.
And in fact, I heard a congresswoman talking about that. So that means people have done serious study and research.
Yeah, they've been working on this for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, a long time. There are two things that I would like for us to think about in terms of how we should approach what's going to be going on in the next few months. Well, three. One is to treat the needs of all of us as holy. This is not it's all encompassing. It's body, soul, spirit. All of it benefits when we do what we need to do. Another thing I think we need to do is forget about the polls. Don't pay attention to them. Do what you have to do. Just work on you and find a way, maybe a way to get other folks to the poll. I know that former Congressman Walter Fauntleroy, he had a little system where he had one person that was responsible in his church for making sure that 5 people got registered and taken to the polls. I don't know if that's something that it's like a cell group. Mm-hmm. They would do that. And then the last thing is look at your vote as a spiritual exercise. It's not just it's not just me taking it but it's really it gives you the essence. You are actually physically expressing the essence of your heart to have things right, not just for yourself, but for other people. So you're not doing this just for yourself. You're doing this for other people. And so I think that's one of the things that we can do that could help. Because the other side, it's about me, myself, and I. But for us who claim it should be about what we do.
Repeat those two things again, Don. The two things you say we need to focus on.
I think that we should forget about the polls. Don't worry about the polls. Do what you got to do. The other thing is treat the needs of the people as holy, and then use your vote as a spiritual exercise, even as a prayer. And maybe you can pray while you're in there. And I know that's the way we worked it at Bread for the World. When we would have people to write letters, we only not wrote the letter, but we prayed over the letter. And in the name of Jesus, we ask that what we petition in our letter would become to fruition. And we would hit the mark. I mean, we had such a phenomenal rate of success, and the organization grew because it had an underpinning of faith. And that's the way we did it.
What is it? Acts 1:8 says, "You shall have power after the Holy Ghost has come upon you." We need to recognize that the Holy Ghost power is more than me speaking in tongues.
Right.
The Holy Ghost power is more than me doing a dance in the church. I love the church, as they say. I love to, as the comedian says, I love to have church. we don't need to limit how we define church as what goes on in the sanctuary. Actually, the call to worship begins the praise and worship, but the benediction begins the service. So we don't do serving until we leave the sanctuary. Right. So we come in here to get re-energized, refilled, or whatever, right. But we leave here with an attitude that it is time to serve. It is time to serve. And I will say this for the pastors that I've seen who've come out strongly for Mr. Trump, and saying that Vice President Kamala Harris cannot help us as a people. This man has been convicted of 34 felonies. Every court that he went to trying to get the 2020 elections overturned, even of judges that he had appointed. One thing, when you get to court, they're not interested in opinions, they're interested in facts. If you don't have the facts, they could care less about your opinions. None of those courts supported not one claim. So he has 34 felony convictions, everything of that. Now, according to those who have done this, the man is very liberal when it comes to dismissing the truth. So what kind of example is he setting if we are finding fault in everything that she does? And again, the conservative right have focused on prayer in schools or not prayer in schools, abortion, and gay rights. Those are not the only issues that we're supposed to be concerned about. I have no problems with you being against those or supporting those issues, but that is not the totality of the agenda of the folk that I pastor. There are some other issues, and certainly we're concerned about single mothers. We're concerned about the high percentage of African Americans who are incarcerated every year. That has caused homes to be split, homes to be fatherless. And so there are so many other issues. Yes, we need to have more tutoring. Yes, we need to have more big brothers, little brothers. But I am not going to turn away from a woman who was a prosecutor, a Commonwealth's attorney, a district attorney. Commonwealth is Virginia term. Elected as the Attorney General for her state, elected as a U.S. Senator from her state, then elected as Vice President. So to say that she has no experience is a blatant lie. She's probably the most experienced, no, not probably, she's the most experienced person running in this election for President, Vice President, or dog catcher. She has the experience to do whatever she feels led to do. And so you're not going to convince me that I need to get on board with the religious rights agenda when they refuse to get on board with our agenda. It shouldn't be separate. If we're all Christians, we should have a unified agenda, but we don't. We don't because they will not get on board with our agendas like they want us to get on board with their agenda. So until you can show me how Mr. Trump's behavior, integrity, whatever, supersedes that of Vice President Kamala Harris, then there's no way you're going to convince me that I need to turn against the sister and vote for him. The Lord bless you is our prayer, and we hope that we have been used by the Lord to inspire, to motivate you to become more active. Don't just sit at your house and think you don't have to go out carrying signs, raising your voice. You can just go into that booth, and what happens in that booth is between you and your God. But please, if you're not registered, I had the information on here in Martinsville in Henry County when early voting starts, but you need to know that there is a deadline. If you're not a registered voter, there is a deadline. You need to call. Oh my God, I left that in the back.
It's 22 days prior to the election.
Okay.
That would be somewhere around October the 14th or 15th.
I would encourage them to get in there before October the 1st. But you can also do early voting, and I think that starts in September. You don't have to wait to the day, which will be the first Tuesday or the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Anyway, get on there. I'm sorry. I apologize. I had an emergency situation that took me away from the church about 2 hours, so some of the preliminaries that I had planned to have, I don't have, but we'll probably do a follow-up next week. This is important, my brothers and sisters. This is critically important. Please, as Bishop Williams has said, Congressman Fauntleroy, he pastored New Bethel Baptist Church, I believe, in Washington for many, many years, also worked with Dr. King very closely, would ask each member to see that 5 people that you know, make sure that they vote. It's time for us to keep America like it ought to be. And that is freedom for everybody, not freedom for a specialized group, freedom for everybody. This is the kind of democracy that we want to use as an example for the world. God bless you. May heaven smile upon you is our prayer. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to just share with us. Again, here at Mount Sinai, worship begins Sunday morning at 11 a.m. You are so welcome to come and be a part of us. Grace and peace. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Bishop.